We started the project, there were really two fundamental questions that we wanted to answer. That is, one, why was this virus so particularly virulent? Why did it kill so many people, especially young, healthy adults? And secondly, where did this virus come from? We were hoping to learn from what we see in 1918 to apply it to the future, that we could understand how pandemics form and why particular flu viruses cause more disease than others.
You want to do this? Why do you want to weaponize something that was such a killer and killed so many innocent people? And more importantly, I was always wondering how this happened. How did this 1918 thing happen? And in my research, I came across a book that was published in 1920 entitled The Horrors of Vaccination. It was a research man named Charles Higgins in New York, had done his own research project for 2 years and put together this book, and he presented the first copy off the press to Woodrow Wilson. The whole intent was to stop the mandatory vaccination of our military troops. What he shows in this book is a documented structure that the 1918 virus came out of the mass vaccination of our troops in World War I.
Many cases originally diagnosed as influenza in the American Expeditionary Forces have subsequently proven to be typhoid. Intestinal types of supposed influenza should always be considered as possible typhoid until proven otherwise. The frequency with which atypical, mild, unrecognized cases of typhoid and paratyphoid fever has occurred in the American Expeditionary Forces among vaccinated men makes it absolutely essential to surround all such cases of undetermined fever with the same precautions which it is found necessary to apply to established typhoid or paratyphoid patients, to avoid contact infections in the wards among other patients and hospital personnel. And finally, at the end of his presentation, Charles M. Higgins presented the following conclusion to the President of the United States, where he stated, "As soon, therefore, as this crushing fact of the great danger of vaccination to human health and life enters the mind and conscience of the mass of the people, and is fully grasped by the legislative, the judicial, and the executive minds of the country, from whom it has been so long concealed by medical falsehood in high places, this enlightenment will, I firmly believe, result in the permanent abolishment of all compulsory vaccination, if not in the penal prohibition of general vaccination, as being now more dangerous than natural smallpox. And to that great fact, and to this final and prophetic thought, Mr. President, I ask your careful attention in closing this exposure of vaccination horrors and medical mendacities." Respectfully submitted on this U.S. Constitution Day, September 17th, 1919.
So once he had all this analyzed, the question become like Charles Higgins back in 1920. How did this killer virus come to be? Well, we find out that every Allied as well as German troop were given a vaccine manufactured by the Rockefeller Laboratories, a vaccine protecting against typhus fever. Now you look at how the typhus fever vaccine worked. They harvested the human typhus fever virus. They thought it was a bacteria back then, but now I know it's a viral structure, from humans that were infected with typhus fever blisters, harvested the material, injected it into pigs as a carrier, and made the pigs compound and multiply the virus. Then they harvested it from the pigs and put it into chickens as the medium for growth. So there you have the meshing of a direct bodily injection of these viruses. And the RNA started to mingle, and then you have this killer virus that's coming out. This typhus fever vaccine was then given to millions and millions of people worldwide. The Russians got injections, the Germans got it first, before the Allied troops did, but then the U.S. troops, the British troops, all of these that received the vaccine, a goodly percentage of them came down with what they classified as a mystery pneumonia. They called it a paratyphus pneumonia because it was, you had the typhus fever type of symptoms of diarrhea, vomiting, and then it settled into your lungs, and before long you died of what's called a cytokine storm, where your lungs filled up with fluid. You basically died in your own blood. That's how you died. Now, it wasn't until many, many years later they called it influenza of 1918. But all the medical journals, according to Higgins, it was called paratyphus pneumonia. It was this mystery killer. But Higgins tied it into the vaccines very, very well, and this book was presented to President Woodrow Wilson. So there we have the understanding of how this killer virus came about in the first place.